The last thing I'd like to point out is that you can use ViewState yourself if you find it useful to retain state across a postback to the same page. So it's just another repository of data that's going to be round-tripped in this hidden field, the ViewState hidden field. And what you can do is actually just drop pretty much any .NET object in there. Obviously, you can drop primitives like integers and strings, etc. But you can also drop more complex things like lists of objects or custom class definition or instances of classes that you might have created. The only constraint is anything you place into ViewState must be serializable, because what will happen is ASP.NET will take the instance of the class that you pass in, serialize it into a binary form, and then base64 encode the binary data for your controls. And the way you access this is by going into, or just accessing the ViewState property on your page. And this just taps into the existing collection of ViewState, and you can augment it with whatever data you find useful. So let me show you an example of using ViewState explicitly. Let's go ahead and add a new page here to do some testing with and call it use ViewState. And what I thought I might do is go back to our example where we had a list box that was posting back. And what I thought I'd do is just keep track of how many times the user has clicked on the list box, so that and we'll keep that information in ViewState. So let's go ahead and add a handler for this list box change notification, list box, and let's also put a label here. So I'm going to print out how many times the user has clicked or selected an item in the list box, and let's set it initially to 0. And let's also go prefix the label with you clicked the list box times. Okay, so we're just going to replace that 0. And back in our code, what I want to do is every time the user clicks on this list box is go modify a value in ViewState. Now, one technique I like to use is to create a property definition, which I'm going to do using the little code snippet here, prop. And I'm going to expose it as an integer. I want to keep track of how many times the user's clicked. And let's call it list box click count, maybe. And let's go ahead and implement this. And the way I'm going to implement it is by storing the count in ViewState as opposed to mapping it onto a local member variable of the class. So one other thing I like to do when I'm using strings to store ViewState is define those strings up here somewhere as a constant so that I don't mistakenly type the wrong string when I'm trying to retrieve it later. So let's just call this list box click count. You can come up with whatever string indexing mechanism you like for retrieving data from ViewState. It's always going to be scoped by your page, so you don't have to worry about clashing with other elements. Okay, so I'm going to return. You always want to see if it's actually in there or not. So let's cast the result to an integer, and I'm going to go access ViewState index by my LBCC string. And if that's null, I want to send back 0 for the default value. If you haven't seen this operator before, this simply says if this entity here is null, return this. If it's not null, return whatever's in here. And then I'm just casting the result to an integer to send it back as the proper value. And for the set, I'm just going to say ViewState index by LBCC is equal to the value that was passed in. Okay, then what we can do is we can increment the value just by using a post increment operator here. And then we can print out the value by saying label 1.text is equal to listboxCount.toString. Okay, so every time the user clicks on the list box, we're going to increment the value in our ViewState, and that will be round-tripped back to the client. So when the page is posted again, that click event, or that click count, will be sent back and reinstated in this ViewState field. So when I pull it out, it will have the incremented value. So let's go ahead and try running that, see the behavior, if the behavior works the way we expect 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks good. And let's just take a look at the ViewState field. So once you've done this, you should be able to go inspect the ViewState and take a look at the custom content that you placed in there. And in fact, we see it right here at the top. The current list box click count is set to 7. So any custom data you would place in here would be dropped into a name value collection like this. And again, this value would be serialized state for your class or whatever you ended up dropping in there. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about state management in your ASP.NET applications. The ViewState repository is always at your disposal. Controls use it for their own state, and you're welcome to use it too. Just beware that it is going to be round-tripped. So unlike something like session state, which stays on the server, this is going to be part of the request response stream. So it's a good replacement for things you might have done in the past using hidden fields. It gives you a nice, strongly typed way of achieving the same type of functionality.